Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast. We are headed into our final segment of the day. We're going to be talking about some running back moves. I also do briefly just want to touch on a couple of the moves from today. During the course of this show, we haven't had a chance to talk about it just yet, but we do have the news that the Steelers are signing former Ravens linebacker Patrick Queen. Now, obviously, Saquon going from the Giants to the Eagles is drawing a lot of attention in terms of inter-division moves, but this is a pretty significant one. Very interesting to see how this is going to play out. Patrick Queen has shown a lot of highs in his career. Now, some of his best days did come after they traded for Roquan Smith at the trade deadline during the 2022 season. So there, I think, was a little bit of hesitation from Baltimore, the organization, to trust Patrick Queen to be a real franchise cornerstone guy, but did finish All-Pro second team this past year, and he gets a 3-year, $41 million contract. Is an interesting move for sure, as the Steelers are hoping to take their team to the next level. Of course, signed Russell Wilson, and we will see how everything plays out there in Pittsburgh. But one other team that I want to briefly mention before getting on to the running backs here is the fact that I did not have the Rams as a winner, but they definitely have a real argument as the way this has played out so far. A few days ago, they re-signed their guard, Kevin Dotson, who was a big addition for them coming into the team this past season and put together some really nice games for them. They go out and they signed the guard from the Lions, Jonah Jackson, who had an incredible season, and he should provide a lot of value for that team as well. They also just went out and addressed some of their secondary needs, where they went and signed former Jaguars cornerback Darius Williams. The Rams were very young on the defensive side of the ball last year. They were relying a lot on Raheem Morris to sort of bring the most out of the youth that was on the roster, and now they are able to bring in a new guy that should be more of a legitimate cornerback one for them this upcoming year. But on that note, we're going to get into the running back market here, where we talked about it a little bit. I considered running backs to be a winner as a whole, just as a position from this offseason, based off of the fact that we were seeing more multi-year deals that were, we got a handful of contracts that were over $8 million. We got a couple $12 million plus contracts in terms of annual value. And I know that that's not something to necessarily write home about, but I do think that it was a step in the right direction after last year, where we saw guys having to settle for some one-year deals at a pretty cheap rate because of the fact that they weren't expected to get the level of contracts that they were hoping for going into it. You had Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley both getting franchise tagged last year, having to work through negotiations in the front office to even show up at the beginning of the year, and they end up seeing themselves get a boost in terms of the value. Now, we did see the salary cap as a whole take an increase, which probably did not hurt them by any means, but with the number of running backs that were also on the open market, there was a little bit of a chance that the quantity of them was going to dilute the value a little bit, and I don't think that that was really the case. You look at Saquon and Jacobs specifically, who were prime franchise tag candidates, and the fact that they got more annual value than they would have had they just been franchise tagged. The number this year was just over $12 million, and they were able to reach that. So I think that that's a really positive development for them. And I think that specifically looking at these two in particular is important, because you have to keep in mind their ability to catch out of the backfield. Now, this isn't necessarily law because we saw Austin Eckler struggle to get the same sort of a contract, but I also think Eckler, for as incredible as he's been the past handful of years, he just really looked to be worn down last season. He's been an extremely high usage guy through the course of his career with the Chargers, and last year dealt with an injury early in the season as well that he just never really fully recovered from. But he gets a 2-year deal, so maybe he can turn things around. I don't know. At this point, he's going into his age 29 season. It doesn't seem like his best years are still ahead of him, but I don't think that that's a necessarily big time lesson for the league as a whole. I think that we're shifting more so to a little bit of the college style of offense, which maybe isn't exactly what running backs want to hear, but where it's a lot more by committee, and that's where I think that a lot of these guys can shine. I do think that Eckler can find a way to be a little bit of a committee guy. The workhorse bell cow running back doesn't really seem to still be existing in the NFL quite the level that we have seen it do so in the past, but you are able to at least make an argument for yourself being of higher value if you do have a little bit more versatility. And that's where I think that Christian McCaffrey is a little bit the golden boy of what running backs should look to sort of make their game look like. Alvin Kamara used to be a really good example. He sort of tailed off as the years came as well, but the fact that the 49ers can trust Christian McCaffrey to line up just about anywhere, can trust him to run routes. I'm not saying make yourself a wide receiver, but at least being able to have that positional versatility and be able to give different looks, because I think that's something that's been very interesting in the NFL over the course of the past handful of years is the innovation on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball, where coaches are still finding a way to provide different looks to the opposing team. And specifically, Shanahan does this, being able to line up Deebo Samuel in the backfield and Christian McCaffrey out in the slot, and Kyle Juszczyk can be lined up outside as well. And they just have all these different ways to confuse the defense. Also, still a little bit of a workshop here, but I also do think that we saw a little bit of some innovation on the defensive side of the ball, despite the team not being very good as a whole, is the fact that Jonathan Gannon, the first-year head coach for the Cardinals, he was doing some very interesting, and again, a lot of it's about the pre-snap looks that you end up giving, where that's where you have all these different players. If you're looking at a 49ers, where you have all these different positional players lined up on different parts of the field. We also saw Gannon do some very interesting things. He was, of course, the defensive coordinator of the Eagles when they went to the Super Bowl. But just, it was this pre-snap motion of trying to confuse the opposing quarterback. And I'm getting a little bit off track here, but again, I think that as a whole, it's just about the NFL continues to adapt in different ways, and it's always a chess match. And what I think helps so much is having running backs that are able to be really versatile. I also think that specifically Josh Jacobs more so than Barkley, but if you have a little bit of that extra size and a little bit of an extra ability to help out in the pass blocking game, just being a threat at least in that is another way, as I think some of the talent on the defensive front line is about as high as we've ever seen in the NFL. And as a result, we're seeing offensive lines break down a lot faster. We're seeing some of these young quarterbacks struggling to adapt to it, where you have some running backs that are getting paid that are able to be quick options out of the backfield, but also be able to step in there and be a difference maker there. I think that and we'll see about this. I'm not sure how many years he has left on his contract. I can probably look it up right now, but I think an example of somebody who could prove to be very valuable in the running back game as years come is Jaylen Warren of the Pittsburgh Steelers, where he is a real do-it-all guy. Now, the elite talent hasn't necessarily flashed in the way that we've seen some of these other guys yet, but he is one of the best running backs that I watch on any given Sunday in terms of picking up blitzes and stepping up into the hole. But while also being a receiving threat, he had 61 catches this past year, while also providing almost 800 yards rushing on the ground as well. So he's just somebody, again, this is a little bit of a tangent thought here, but I don't think that the running back market as a whole is dead. I think that it's just adapting and it's changing from the hard-nosed heavy hitter guys to a little bit more of the versatility. Now you look at a guy like Derrick Henry, who also just got paid as of this morning, and Henry at this point too now is a little bit old on the older side as well, but has still absolutely shown to be an effective player even in recent years. He gets $8 million per year while he is entering close to his 30s, if not already, as I will double check this as well. But yeah, he just turned 30 years old, and for him to still be getting, $8 million per year, I think that is also still fairly impressive considering the conversations that were being had last offseason. And he's probably one of the last of a dying breed in terms of just being the hard-nosed running back that can put a team on his back that way. He's never really been a receiving threat, but he does, to me, feel like one of those last guys that can play that style of running back and see financial success this deep into his career. The one running back that we saw the two running backs we saw in the first round last season were Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson, who are dual threats. And I just feel like that's the way that this is shifting. And once that shift does take place, I think we can see the running back market sort of swing back to a more effective market as a whole. But that is all we have time for today. Thank you very much for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Just a reminder to like, follow, subscribe, wherever you may be keeping up with us. Helps us out a ton. And we will be back same time tomorrow at 2 o'clock. So we will see you then. Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go.